The Predator chassis of tanks has seen use since the Great Crusade. Though in the 41st millennium you mainly see the Predator Destructor and Annihilator, that is not to say that its more exotic variants have gone the way of the Dodo, and do still exist, though in smaller numbers usually, and usually only among the older chapters. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we are covering the Space Marine Deimos Predator, a Legends datasheet for the Space Marines. So the Deimos Predator comes in at 115 points, making it the cheapest Predator tank. It moves 10 inches with toughness 10, a 3+ save, 11 wounds, leadership 6+, and OC 3. Fairly standard, but at this price point it's really hard to beat in terms of toughness and speed. In terms of ranged weapons, it has a lot. The Conversion Beamer is conversion, sustained hits D3. Conversion means if you hit a target at greater than 12 inches, a 4+ is a critical hit. With one attack that hits on 3s at 24-inch range with strength 7, AP 1, and damage 3, a solid enough marine and infantry dealer. The Plasma Destroyer is blast D3 attacks that hit on 3s at 36-inch range with strength 8, AP 2, and damage 2 on its base profile. Very good for dealing with Space Marines and similar infantry. If you overcharge it, it of course gains hazardous, and then it goes up to strength 9, AP 3, and damage 3. A very strong weapon in general, though a little low on shots. A Storm Bolter can be pintle mounted at 2 attacks with Rapid Fire 2 that hit on 3s at 24-inch range with strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. Then the Infernus Cannon is a Torrent, ignore cover, 2d6 attacks, auto hit at 12-inch range with strength 6, AP 1, and damage 1. The Magna Melta Cannon is Melta 4, 18-inch range with 2 attacks that hit on 3s at 12-inch range with AP 4 and damage d6, an immensely powerful weapon. The Las Cannon is 1 attack that hits on 3s at 48-inch range with strength 12, AP 3, damage d6 plus 1. The Heavy Flamer is Torrent, ignores cover, 2d6 attacks, or rather d6 attacks that hit on 12s at strength 5, AP 1, and damage 1. The Heavy Bolter is Heavy, sustained hits 1, 3 attacks that hit on 3s at 36-inch range with strength 5, AP 1, and damage 2. Then the Hunter Killer Missile is 1 shot that hits on 2s at 48-inch range with strength 14, AP 3, and damage d6. Overall, a nice little extra anti-tank option. In terms of loadout, you have either the Conversion Beamer, Melta Destroyer, Plasma Destroyer, or Infernus Cannon on the top, and then you can take Heavy Bolters, Heavy Flamers, or the Las Cannons on the sponsons, and a pintle-mounted Heavy Bolter and Hunter Killer Missile on the side. Melee is just 4 attacks that hit on 4s at strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. In terms of core abilities, it's Deadly Demise D3, so not too bad of an explosion, but nothing too crazy. And then, of course, its core ability is Armored Spearhead, which is very powerful. When making ranged attacks, this model may reroll 1s, and if the target is on an objective marker you don't control, you can reroll the hit roll instead. This is massively useful on all of its weapons, and makes it significantly more accurate than its brothers, and is also the most general purpose rule we see on any of these tanks. It's overall very, very solid. In terms of buffing options, the Tech Marine of course comes to mind. Giving it +1 to hit is huge, as with reroll 1s it will be as close to perfectly accurate as possible. And then another one I wanted to mention is Vulcan Histon, as the Melta Destroyer is so powerful, as are its flamer guns. Rerolling wounds is always super useful, especially at strength 12, just to make it slightly more consistent to get that huge d6 plus 4 damage through. Though of course this is kind of a given with Vulcan, as he pairs quite well with Torrent and Melta weapons. I didn't mention Ironfather Pharos, but the same things apply with him as they do to the Tech Marine. He's just slightly better at doing that job than the Tech Marine is, though of course he is more expensive. In terms of detachments, Gladius of course likes Advance and Shoot, and extra AP can be great with the extra Flamers, for example. In terms of Firestorm, it's the obviously best spot for the Melta Destroyer. The +1 strength brings it from just great anti-tank to exceptional anti-tank, and the reroll wounds from Vulcan is even more so, just apocalyptic. The full fire tank also offers a lot of Torrent for a potential devastating wound stratagem, and the Plasma Destroyer really likes the extra strength up close just to bring it up to strength 10 to make it a more competent vehicle hunter. In terms of Ironstorm, it's another great place for the Melta Destroyer and accompanying Las Cannons on the sponsons. Sustained hits is great for the Melta and Plasma, and especially with full rerolls. Lethal hits is very useful on it as well if you can get that through an enhancement. And then for the rest, it will generally excel as just some very fast, very tough tank that can be kitted out to whatever you need it for. Doesn't need to scrap over far-flung objectives, just give it the 3 flamers and it should be able to handle objective monkeys very well. If you need extra anti-tank, bring the Meltas and the Las Cannon. And anything else, really, you could just build it however you want. For general purpose, maybe just the Plasma Destroyer and the las cannons will be the most take-all-comers build to deal with all targets in a relatively even way. In terms of Crusade rules, which obviously we need to cover for Legends units, Space Marines can give it Resilient Machine Spirit for +2 wounds, which is handy enough for a little bit of extra toughness. Weapon Modification can give you extra strength and attacks, which is great on the Beamer, and the Melta, of course. In terms of Tyrannic War, Blessed Hole is great for extra toughness, as that gives you a invulnerable save. Auto Repair Nodes gives you a recover 1 wound per command phase. And Reinforced Superstructure is very useful, as it's -1 AP from Strength 7 or below, so great against things like Heavy Bolters or Custodes. In terms of Pariah Nexus, Hardened Defenses is very useful for a Feel No Pain. And Tank Hunter is added efficiency, especially if you are running the tank hunting builds, unsurprisingly. Heavily Armored is also very useful to keep this thing around in critical situations, as well as also helping to stave off battle scars that it could potentially get from being blown up, as this, of course, gives you a once per battle reduce a attack to 0 damage, which can also pair with the Tech Marine enhancement from the Ironstorm detachment if you want this thing to be really, really hard to kill. Moving on, we have to cover its competitors, and unsurprisingly, it's just kind of the other Space Marine tanks. The Gladiator, Lancer, and Reaper will generally have some overlap with this thing, I'd say with the exception of the Plasma Destroyer build. But the main difference is the huge price disparity, given the fact that both of these tanks are 150 points or more, and this one is only 115. There is definitely a spot for both of them, often fighting alongside each other, I'd say, as well as they're not really directly competing for the exact same position. Even though they're both tanks, the huge price disparity makes this one just, in general, a lot more flexible than the others. I also wanted to mention its modern-day brothers of the Predator, Destructor, and Annihilator. I think on price alone, this Predator will outperform the other two, and honestly, I think damage-wise, it's not too far off. Though I will say the other two are significantly more comfortable as long-range fire support. As well, the las cannons have good range. Almost every other weapon is rather close range, with the exception of the Plasma Destroyer, which has a rather healthy 36-inch range, though the Conversion Beamer and Furnace Cannon and Magna Melta Destroyer are all very close range, so this thing will want to be up front in the fight, or getting close to its targets generally. Though I think, again, the price allows this thing to just excel as, even if not an integral part of the army, as a fast-moving objective grabber with a lot of damage and toughness. In terms of its best uses, the Deimos really does have everything going for it. For the points, as I mentioned, it's quite tough, it's pretty dang fast at 10-inch moves, and with all of its different weaponry, it can be kitted out for almost any role it needs. The Plasma Cannon excels against Marines and all kinds of armored infantry, and can do very well against things like Sentinels. The Melta is an absolute amazing armor hunter. The Conversion Beamer is definitely the most niche, but I think in Crusade can definitely be geared up a lot. And of course its Infernus build, while it has some slight anti-synergy with its reroll ability, is still very useful if you just need something to clear out hordes. This would excel in places where you have a lot of anti-tank already, or if you're using elite melee infantry, something like Deathwing Knights, who really don't want to be slowed down by something as meaningless as Gretchen, or say, for example, Imperial Guard Blobs. As the Infernus Cannons aren't the most powerful flamers, they do have a lot of volume. They can still do a lot of damage to things. Again, Gretchen, Imperial Guard, really will get scorched very fast by this thing. I think it really just excels as an excellent tank in casual games, and again, that's what most of us play anyways, so go out, get yourself a Deimos Predator, build it however you want, and use it. I've been Spoons Rattling, hope you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. The Predator Annihilator is the anti-tank variant of the Predator tanks, of course mainly known for their long use by the Space Marines, as well as some other forces of the Imperium. They have seen service since the Horus Heresy. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we're covering the Predator Annihilator, the anti-tank weapon of the old Space Marines, if you will. The Predator Annihilator is of course a light tank coming in at 130 points, the same as its Destructor cousin. It moves 10 inches, its toughness 10, 3+ save, 11 wounds, 6+ leadership, and OC3. Fairly standard for the cost, but not necessarily a bad thing, as it is still very resilient to all but the heaviest of anti-tank weapons, though things like buffed autocannons could really give it some trouble, and las cannons of course will blow holes in it very efficiently. On the pintle, you can of course have a combi bolter or combi weapon. The combi bolter, rapid fire 2, 24-inch range, 2 attacks, a hit on 3, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1.
Said it one time, and I'll say it a million times. It's good at light anti-infantry, and not much more. The combi weapon, rapid fire 1, devastating wounds, anti-infantry 4+, 24-inch range, 1 attack, hits on 4, strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. Much worse than the combi bolter. Leave this one at home. You can, of course, mount a Hunter Killer on it, which is 1 shot at 48-inch range, 1 attack that hits on 2, strength 14, AP 3, and damage d6. A nice little anti-tank 1-shot weapon. However, if you ask any player, they will say it always misses because it feels like it always does. Then it of course has the Predator Las Cannon, which is twin-linked at 48-inch range, 1 attack that hits on 3s at strength 14, AP 3, and damage d6+1. This is at least very efficient at wounding vehicles, though with only 1 attack it is quite prone to missing, unless you are buffing it or aim it at the Oath of Moment target. Then on the sponsons, you can take either a Heavy Bolter or a Las Cannon. The Heavy Bolter has sustained hits 1, 3 attacks that hit on 3s, 36-inch range, strength 5, AP 1, and damage 2, and the Las Cannons are 1 attack that hit on 3s, 48-inch range, strength 12, AP 3, and damage d6+1. Of course, the Las Cannons are the better option here. As much as I like the Heavy Bolters, they just don't really compare to the Las Cannons, and also the Las Cannons interact with the special rule. In terms of melee weapons, fairly standard tank thing, 6 attacks, hits on 4, strength 6, AP 0, damage 1. Thing doesn't want to be in melee, obviously, though it might squash a guardsman or 2 if the need arises. It has Deadly Demise D3, which is of course not too insane, but of course could do some damage to your lines. So make sure you're wary of that. When it's getting on low health, it might be time to move it out of position, as is to not shower your army with mortal wounds on an unlucky roll. Then of course the Annihilator's ability is Annihilator, which lets you reroll a damage roll of 1 when targeting monsters or vehicles. Now this is of course where it's the most important, though this isn't as impactful as it may seem, as not only do you have to roll a 1 for it to do anything, you are also only not gaining that much damage. I believe the math's out, you're only actually getting a half a wound more on average in terms of damage. Not bad, will save a command point from time to time, but overall is not quite as impactful as the Destructor special rule. And speaking of the Destructor, which I will keep comparing it to, the Annihilator unfortunately lacks the main draw of that tank, which is, of course, its general purpose nature and its suite of various weapons. This, of course, means mainly the autocannon and then the sponson las cannons, which gives it a general purpose role, where the Annihilator is a specialist tank. And in terms of being a specialist tank, it doesn't compete very well with the Gladiator Lancer, mainly. And in its own price bracket, I'd say the Ballistus is much better, mainly just because its las cannon has more shots, as well as a slightly better special rule. Of course, though, I don't think it's outrageously awful. I don't think it's as bad as Reavers. However, if you do want to bring a Predator tank, I would recommend just running it as a Destructor, mainly because the Destructor will usually do more damage to tanks. And I already mentioned this earlier, but its special rule, while handy for saving a command point here and there, is unfortunately nothing special, and won't actually average you that much more damage than if you just kind of stayed with the 1. You only on average get about 1 more pip of damage. I think a main buff for this thing would be to drop it by 10 to 15 points, and also to give its main las cannon 2 shots to make it less swingy, which things like the Repulsor and the Lancer don't deal with, as they natively get 2 shots, which is a big deal for these big anti-tank weapons. And of course, those tanks have much better damage results if they do punch through. Unfortunately, out of the Predator tanks, this one just lags far behind the Destructor, and isn't really worth bringing. However, I do hope it gets buffs, and I think that it very well could. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. The Predator chassis tanks are some of the most venerable and long-serving tanks in the Imperium, and especially the Space Marines. Of course, the Destructor is equipped with an autocannon mainly used for general-purpose anti-infantry and anti-light vehicle firepower. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and we are covering the Predator's Destructor, late at night. Anyways, so, the Predator Destructor is of course a rather classic kit, and its in lore has been in service since the Horus Heresy, though this is a much more updated model that we see in the current setting of 40k. The Predator Destructor comes in at 130 points. It has a fairly standard light tank profile, movement 10 inches, so it's rather zippy, toughness 10, a 3+ save, 11 wounds, leadership 6+, and OC 3. This is fairly standard, but that's not necessarily a bad thing when it comes to this. As for 130 points, it is relatively tough, and it's fast. Then, of course, as with any Space Marine thing, it comes with a whole suite of weapons. A combi bolter or combi weapon can be mounted on the pintle. The combi bolter is rapid fire 2, 24 inches, 2 attacks, hit on 3, strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. A fairly simple but solid enough anti-light infantry spray. Combi weapon is Rapid Fire 1, Devastating Wounds and Anti-Infantry 4+, 24-inch range, 1 attack that hits on 4s, at AP 0, Strength 4, and Damage 1. Very weak, not worth bringing over the Combi Bolter. Then, of course, you can staple on a Hunter Killer, which is a one-shot missile that has 48-inch range, 1 attack that hits on 2s at Strength 14, AP 3, and Damage D6. A very nice anti-infantry tank, or anti-tank round that will almost certainly always miss because, of course, it does. The Predator Autocannon is Rapid Fire 2, with 4 attacks that hit on 3s at 48-inch range, Strength 9, AP 1, and Damage 3. Very solid for shooting at light vehicles as well as most kinds of infantry. The Heavy Bolter is Sustained Hits 1, 3 attacks, hit on 3s, 36-inch range at Strength 5, AP 1, and Damage 2. And then the Las Cannon is 1 attack that hits on 3s at 48-inch range, Strength 12, AP 3, and Damage D6 plus 1. Those two are, of course, the sponsored mounted weapons. And while the Heavy Bolter may play slightly nicer with its special rule, I would always take the Las Cannons just to round the tank out better. Then in terms of melee weapons, it's a very weak Armored Hull, 6 attacks that hit on 4s at Strength 6, AP 0, and Damage 1. Then in terms of abilities, in terms of core, it has Deadly Demise D3, which is fairly standard for a vehicle of its size, but of course that is something to be wary of if you have anything fragile nearby. Then its special rule is the Destructor. Each time this model makes a ranged attack against infantry, add 1 AP. Now this is of course very solid, though it is of course slanted more towards hunting infantry of course, but that's not a bad thing as the Destructor autocannon really needs extra AP to deal with the tougher kinds of infantry. And the Las Cannons even appreciate it when shooting at things that may not, or may rely on a, say, invulnerable save or in cover. Anyways, from here we're actually going to cover the best use of this tank, and it's fairly standard, as it is a very simple unit from a sort of time long since past in 40k's history. The Predator Destructor is a bare-bones tank, if ever there was one, is a way to put it. It has its main turret weapon, then of course it has the 2 sponsons, and a pintle-mounted weapon with a Hunter Killer. This is of course a sign of its time, as it's not quite as weapons-focused as things that came a little after it, things like the Lehman Russ, the Bane Blade, or of course the Rogel Dorn, the Sisters variant, or the, of course, modern Primaris tanks. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. This thing is one of the cheapest tanks in the game that is not, paper mache, and it still packs a very solid punch. Its autocannon is great against all kinds of infantry, and the Las Cannons are, of course, always solid against tanks. Even the Hunter Killer adds to that, even though most players have such bad luck with them even hitting. Overall, it's a very well-rounded tank. Its main weapon, of course, really appreciates its special rule, and it does really do a lot of damage, especially in rapid-fire range against things like Space Marines and even Terminators. The Las Cannons, of course, help it deal with things above Toughness 9, as well as also pitching in against, again, things like Terminators, where the autocannon might not be able to finish the job fully. The Las Cannons can seriously put in a lot of work there. I'd say that in its price bracket, it's by far the most flexible tank. Out of all of these sort of mid-weight tanks. Of course, the Gladiators all have arguably more firepower, but they all come at a higher price tag and are all more specialized into their, of course, specific niches. Where the Destructor, of course, has its Las Cannons and its autocannon. It can have its cake and eat its too. In general, I'd say that the Predator is a very simple tank, but a very efficient one. If you just need firepower, you're not going to find a better package anywhere else. It's an old tank, it's a venerable tank, it's a well-loved tank, it's a classic tank. It's a tank that gets the job done with none of the frills, and for a pretty efficient price. However, it's not perfect. Of course, things like Las Cannons will still give it a very bad day, but still, for its price, it can't have absolutely everything, and being weak to some of the best weapons in the game, I think is a totally fair trade-off. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.